Electric cars. Quite often they get a lot of stick for being expensive, boring and restrictive. Affordable, fun and flexible never really come into the conversation. But there is a new electric car that on the surface looks as if it's been designed to have good range, to be quite affordable and crucially, to be quite good fun to drive. This is the Porsche Taycan Rear Wheel Drive. And if you've been waiting for an electric car that can put a massive smile on your face, then this is the electric car you've been waiting for. It's the cheapest Taycan you can buy at just over £70,000, and I know that's not exactly cheap, but importantly, it has a range of apparently 300 miles, and more importantly, it also sends all of its power to the back. This one is for the drivers. It can genuinely throw shapes. I mean, look at it. It's doing things that only a sports car can do. It feels like a sports car. It feels like a Porsche.
Why is that? Well, instead of using two motors, one on each axle, the Taycan uses a single motor driving the rear wheels. That, in addition to the fact it's 90 kilograms lighter than the Taycan 4S, means it's more agile than the more powerful, more grippy all-wheel drive models.
All Porsches have phenomenal steering and Taycans are no different, but especially this Taycan. And I think that's down to the fact that it's lighter on the front end, and that means it's got this real sure-footedness to the way that it turns in. You lean on the front axle and you can get this feeling of absolute confidence in the way that it goes around corners. It's really something. It's really responsive, it's really quick and genuinely satisfying to drive.
On first impressions then, this new electric rear-wheel drive Porsche is a blast. It's fun, but it has one slight problem that you don't really want in a fast car, and that is, it's not actually that fast.
There are two versions of the Porsche Taycan rear-wheel drive, a performance battery and a performance battery plus, and these affect not only the amount of range you get, but also the amount of performance you get. The basic model gives you access to 326 metric horsepower, which is not much more than you get in a hot hatch, quite frankly. However, on the overboost, for short periods, like when you're doing launch control, it increases that to a total of 408 metric horsepower. Not bad, but in the world of electric cars, it's pretty much nowhere. In the words of Shania Twain, that don't impress me much.
This upgraded Performance Battery Plus gives you 380 metric horsepower by default, increasing to 476 metric horses during launch control. But again, that's not massively impressive either. Let me demonstrate.
I'll do a launch control, show you what I mean. So drive mode in Sport Plus, left foot hard on the brake, right foot on the accelerator, release, and away we appear to be going. 0 to 62 is done in 5.4 seconds in both versions of the Taycan rear wheel drive. I mean, it's fairly quick, but I mean, it's not exactly mind-blowing, is it? In any other electric car at this price point, if I did a launch control, my head would have fallen off by now. I would have been injured. I am totally fine in this car, and I'm very disappointed at that, I can tell you. And actually, while we're here getting all this stuff out in the open, let me get another thing off my chest. All that stuff I said earlier on about this car being semi-affordable, it's not semi-affordable, it's expensive. It's £70,000, and that is a lot of money, even for a Porsche.
The £70,000 starting price is actually a bit of a red herring, because after a few options, things start to ramp up quite quickly. You'll have to pay for paint. Anything other than black or white, including this very interesting shade of frozen berry metallic, will cost you a minimum of £774. These 20-inch Sport Aero wheels are £1,776. If you want a leather interior, that's £2,500. If you don't want leather and prefer a vegan finish instead, that's £2,500. Sport seats, £1,100. Taycan logo on the side, £150. Performance Battery Plus upgrade, which gives you improved power and range, £4,000. The total price of this car as you see it is close to £110,000. It's very expensive, but spend a few minutes with the Taycan and you should eventually come to the conclusion that there's a very good reason for that premium price tag.
When you're just driving around town, it just feels genuinely nice. It feels solid, it feels quiet, it feels well built. So many electric cars, because their electric components are very expensive, the batteries and the motors are so costly, they tend to cut corners in other areas, and those corner cutting techniques can tend to lead to the car feeling maybe not as nice and luxurious as you might expect. In a Taycan, Porsche don't cut any corners, so everything just feels like it should. It's lovely. Let's talk about the interior for a second. I love this curved driver display in front of me. Looks so futuristic. The main infotainment screen is also really, really easy to use. You've got a separate display on the center console for all of your climate control settings. And then you've also got an optional driver display, which gives your passenger access to sat-nav and media control, etc. It's got a front trunk, which gives you a little bit of extra flexibility. The boot is a reasonable size, not massive, but certainly big enough. The front seats are nice and comfortable. And at the back, you've got room for 3 people. Well, 2.5. And the headroom, legroom, is actually not as bad as you might expect. Certainly not as big as you get in a Tesla Model S, but definitely livable on a day-to-day basis. There's quite a few driving modes in this car. You've got range, that's the first one, that limits the top speed to 60 miles an hour and also drops the suspension height in order to maximize aerodynamic efficiency. You've got normal, which raises the ride height in order to give you a bit more comfort. Then you've got sport, which ramps up the responsiveness of the throttle and the steering. And then there's Sport Plus, which turns everything up to 11 and gives you a very interesting electric sport sound. It's designed to kind of mimic the sound you get in a petrol car. It's not an exact replica of an internal combustion engine. It sounds much more futuristic than that, almost like the sound that you'd expect a spaceship to make. It sounds a bit corny in theory, but I actually really like it. It gives you a sense that the car's accelerating and gets you more involved with the driving experience than you might otherwise be. If you don't like it, of course, you can switch it off, but I think it adds something. It adds an element of character to the Taycan.
As for the range, Porsche say around the city the Performance Battery Plus will do up to 324 miles, although after a full charge, driven on B roads in temperatures hovering around freezing, don't be surprised to see between 150 and 200 depending on how much you use the heating. Recharging will take around 11 hours overnight on a home charger, but you can go from 5 to 80% in 22 minutes if you can find the charger that can supply 270 kilowatts.
So that's all the boring stuff. That stuff you can probably look up online. Maybe what you can't get a sense for online is whether the Taycan Rear Wheel Drive is genuinely entertaining to drive. Whether this is actually a car designed to appeal to people who just enjoy driving. And the truth is, it's really good.
Where most EVs rely on one trick, raw speed, this car, with its relatively low power, has to impress in other ways. The brakes are excellent, more so than any other electric car I've driven. Strong, accurate, dependable, and that's despite this car's 2.1-ton curb weight. The handling is even more impressive. It's versatile. It's a car you can choose to drive in a number of ways, quick and tidy, or send it and let it hang loose. And it's actually very approachable too, with plenty of grip and traction when you want it, but with well-judged throttle response and a superb chassis that let you confidently explore the limits of handling when the mood strikes you.
The thing with most electric cars up to this point is that they've mostly been pretty one-dimensional. The Taycan Rear Wheel Drive is the exact opposite of that. This car has so many facets to it. It's an absolute joy to drive because every day you drive it, you discover something new. It's full of character. I like this.
Perfect? No. The suitability of the range is still a matter for the individual to decide, and the price is still eye-wateringly high. But if you've ever wondered whether electric cars would one day move on from being simply appliances for ferrying us from A to B, whether one day they might actually be fun, this feels like a watershed moment. This is an electric car worth celebrating, not just for the usual tricks. This is an electric car we can celebrate for things you'd normally expect from the old guard. This electric car is a revelation. The future might just be looking up.